What's up? This is your girl Diva, delivered, inspired, victorious, anointed, and I'm here with my hoodlums, Tonya and Pia. And tonight, Pia's going to be leading the discussion, and we're going to have a little chit chat about that situation on the talk. So go ahead, Pia, take it away.
Good evening, everyone. You may all be familiar with, or perhaps not, depending on how much time you have to watch daytime television. But Sharon Osborne, who was a former host on The Talk, which is a daytime talk show, very similar to shows like The View and The Real, where they get different women from different walks of life and different experiences to talk about various topics in entertainment, news, just different things. And Sharon Osborne had a bit of a conversation or made a comment based on an interview. The interview heard around the world that Oprah did with Prince Harry and Duchess Meghan as they have made their exit from royal duties and no longer have the responsibilities and are now living in the United States permanently. In that interview, Meghan really went into detail about some issues that she faced within the royal family and really called out some issues that were going on that possibly may have been launched against her because of her color. And one of the biggest things is when she went to them asking for help as it related to mental health, she got none. This is not something that is foreign. We heard similar stories from Fergie, who was married to Prince Andrew and talked about some things when she was married to Andrew, ways that she had to cope. And of course, we all know how the demise of Princess Diana happened with her feeling isolated, and this included as well. That being said, Piers Morgan, who is a TV show host in the UK, made it his opinion that he did not believe some of the things that Meghan was stating. Sharon Osborne is a good friend, as we know that she is also originally from the UK, and on the talk spoke out in support of Piers Morgan. As a result, this then sparked another discussion about colorism, racism, and they decided to have a conversation with Sharon because some of the people, and as well as fans, felt like Sharon appeared to be tone deaf as it relates to issues of color. And in that conversation, Sheryl Underwood led that conversation, but things went left very quickly. According to Sheryl Underwood, she was very particular about how she worded questions because she viewed Sharon, her co-host, not only as a co-worker, but also as a friend. But we saw that Sharon became very combative and took a leave of absence. And on March 26th, it was announced that she was leaving the show permanently. One of the issues within that dialogue between Sheryl and Sharon was a point in which she wanted them to explain to her how she was being racist. But more specifically, she went on to say to Sheryl, "You better not cry. I should be the one who's crying." And it seems as though she immediately became the victim in that dialogue and was very aggressive, very defensive. So that is about a couple of months worth of information in a nutshell. Just want to throw that out there and see what you think. How do you feel about people of a different color, particularly white people, telling women or people of color what they should do, how they should respond with their feelings and how they take things that are being said to them? So how do y'all think, how do y'all feel about that?
Listen, honey, first of all, tone policing. you know that they will immediately tell us how we are what tone we're supposed to use. Don't be so aggressive. But what really, let me roll it all the way back to Pierce Morgan. This is the reason why Pierce Morgan, I believe, is mad at Megan, because he went on a date with her. They had drinks. And after she had her first date with Harry, I guess she blocked his number. He's salty about that. So I think that aside from the fact that a lot of people who are not affected directly by issues of race don't see issues of race in anything. Now, let's fast forward to Miss Osborne, husband biting heads off bats. Listen, let me tell you something. First of all, for her to self-center, because that's what she did. She centered herself. Teach me, tell me. Now I'm gonna tell y'all something. There's a group called Be the Bridge to Racial Unity. It is a national group, thousands, maybe even millions of members. And the one thing that they teach is that it is not a Black person's responsibility to educate you, white person, on issues of race. There are books, there are movies, there are documentaries, there are all sorts of peer-reviewed journaled articles that you can read if you are interested in finding out about race and the disparities and the truth behind American history. Because let's face it, American history is American his story, and we don't have to ask who the his is. But I think that what really got under my skin was the fact that Sheryl Underwood was beyond professional. Sheryl Underwood was beyond kind. Sheryl, you could tell that she was measuring, just like you said earlier, Pia, she was measuring her words very, very carefully. And we, as women of color in the workplace, I'm sure each of you have had experiences where somebody white was being aggressive and you had to get all of your blessed assurance and tie it in a knot around your neck so you would not explode because you need your job. And anytime something like that happens, whether we're being the aggressor or not, we are always painted as the aggressor. So I, first of all, applaud Sheryl Underwood for just standing her ground and being, even though she got a right to feel however she want to feel. If she had to cuss Sharon Osborne out and slap the taste out of her mouth, she would have been justified. Because how you gonna tell a Black woman, don't you dare cry? If anybody should cry, it should be me. Right. Making herself, like you said, the victim. How in the salty ham sandwich is she the victim in this situation when she's the one who is making the demands? She's the one who's being aggressive. So I thought that I was surprised that they fired her. She said they didn't, but whatever, that's what happened. But I
really think that she was fired, or did they allow her to leave quietly? And so
she was fired, but they allowed her to say that she wasn't. I think that's what happened. They allowed her for the sake of appearances and for the sake of whatever. Somebody probably signed some non-disclosure agreements and all that kind of stuff. But I believe because there was so much talk of the things that she had said to people of other ethnicities or about people of other ethnicities or LGBTQ people, that they could no longer allow her to sit there if their goal is to be inclusive. And I think it was more about dollars, because if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. It was about sponsors. So that's what I think about that whole thing. I know that was a lot, but that's how I think. That's what I think.
What do you think, Tonya?
I really don't think that a person who is not dealing with the issues that we deal with, a person who doesn't have to worry about talking to their children when they're driving their car, or trying to make sure that their kids make it home safely. When they're not having to really deal with those issues, there's no way that you can dictate to me how I can respond. You can't relate to me. You don't understand the struggles. You don't understand the situations. And I'm not going to say that you don't understand. You don't want to understand.
That's it.
You don't want to put on my shoes. You can't. And honestly, I don't know if you could put on my shoes, because for me, in the midst of struggles, we've learned how to tolerate and compensate. We've learned how to smile even in the midst of chaos. We've learned how to bite our tongues when anyone else would probably have gone off. And so it's there are people that have come to me actually after even this whole ordeal with social and racial injustice occurred, and they came to me and they said, what can I do? I'm not like that. I've got lots of friends who are Black. Really? I mean, what can you do? I have to tell you what you need to do? Mm-hmm. Do you not understand the wrong of what's going on? Do you not understand? How would you feel? How would you feel if you walk into a store and they're following you and they looking at you like you about to shoplift or pick something up when you're just in there shopping? I mean, or when you get something that may be a little pricey and they're looking at you as though, how can you afford that? Or making you try to feel as though you're inadequate, or you don't even have a right to even be in that store. How would you feel? And it's just difficult for me to see how some people kind of brush it over and act as though it's really not that big of a deal. It's really not that serious. When, if you were to put on my shoes, would that not be serious to you? I just just taking on just that standpoint, I just don't understand how in the world anybody can see the wrong of that and try and say, well, it's not really like that. Really? Then how is it like? I mean,
sure. I think, let me see, there's three things I want to say. There was something very interesting in the morning on the way to work. Sometimes I listen to a nationally syndicated radio show called The Breakfast Club. Mm-hmm. Angela Yee, Charlamagne the God, and DJ Envy. Mm-hmm. And they also talked about this in their entertainment segment. And Charlamagne the God said something that was very striking. And, of course, with this narrative, the angry Black woman narrative. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And like you were saying, Deirdre, I think that we have had to tread lightly as women of color in terms of how we've responded and always restrained our emotions in an effort not to be perceived as the angry Black woman. But he asked a question that really made me think, when has that ever served us? Has us working hard not to be perceived that way, has it served us well? And looking back on it, as much as we cling to the quote that we now say that First Lady Michelle Obama said at DNC, when they go low, we go high. Certainly that is the ideal, right? Mm-hmm. But sometimes even at our best, we are still, and we have still been considered less than. You take someone like Oprah Winfrey, to your point, Tonya, who was in Australia some years ago, walked into a store, high-end purses being sold there. And she's in the part of Australia that they did not recognize she is Oprah Winfrey. And when she asked for the price of one of the purses, they looked at her and said to her, if I'm not mistaken, you can't afford that. Not really realizing she probably had enough money to buy the entire store and hire them or not to work in the store. So there is a level, right, of success that even the height of high society as African Americans that we can achieve. The one thing that we cannot escape, and not that we should want to escape, is the color of our skin. No matter how successful you are, no matter how educated you are, no matter what it is that you achieve in life, there's always going to be skepticism of you based on the color of your skin, that people are not going to recognize your achievement because you are Black. So that was one point I wanted to bring to you and see what you all thought about that, as far as how has us not being the angry Black woman, and particularly in Sheryl Underwood's case, I certainly agree. She had every right, because at that point, the level of class, the level of professionalism that she carried this dialogue to lead this conversation, making sure that she did not come off as combative, as accusatory, pointing fingers, but it was simply a way of having a discussion to educate not only each other, but the audience that tunes in every single day, right? Because there's so many different people in different walks of life that watch these shows. And for Sharon to immediately get as defensive as she got, I felt at that point, all bets were off.
Yeah.
But to still maintain that restraint is a part of our training.
Yeah.
I think back to Philando Castile and him being gunned down right in front of his fiance. I'm sorry, we have lights that signal on and off without movement. And when they're in the back of the car with the little girl, and the woman is still responding to the officers, yes, sir, no, sir. And Trevor Noah on, what is it, The Daily Show, says even in situations like that, we have been trained to still maintain our politeness, right? Our manners, even in moments where we have been wronged. How she is still polite after seeing her fiance killed, murdered in front of her, to this same police officer saying, yes, sir, no, sir, yes, being that compliant person. But again, even in those situations, again, when has it served us? Not.
It never has.
Okay.
It never. I'm gonna tell you, this happened was it yesterday? I think it was yesterday or day before yesterday. Me and my husband went to rent a steam cleaner, whatever you call it, right? And so they say you bring it back and then we'll give you this $15 cleaning fee back. Well, they said they wasn't gonna give it back. And so I'm like, okay, let's go. My husband did not use any restraint. He cussed everybody in that store out and came out with my $15. And see, me being as I am, and you talking about the training, being trained the way that I was, what I was going to do is just walk out of the store and say, okay, and be out of $15. And he was like, no, you're not going to do my wife like that. And he was loud, he was unruly, and he was effective, because that $15 is in my purse. You see what I'm saying? But we have been taught, trained for the sake of our lives, because our lives are at stake. Like resisting arrest, that's some BS. That's a BS charge. What is determined as resisting? When I've seen these videos where these people, the guy who had the police officer hanging out of the window and hit him in the head with the hammer, and the guy that's chasing cops with a knife, and all this kind of stuff, and they are still alive. What is resisting arrest? So I think that the history of this country has taught us as Black people, and we are way smarter than people give us credit for, because we know how to stay alive.
Mm.
You see, and those very things, not being the angry Black woman, because let's face it, as Black women, when it comes to the totem pole, we're on the bottom. We're on the bottom. And so we are probably more likely to do exactly what Sheryl Underwood did, because we don't want to be labeled and all that kind of stuff, and then we wouldn't get our $15 back.
Yes. I can also think of a time, I don't know if you remember, during the time of the fallout of the previous administration, and Omarosa got fired from her position.
Yeah.
And she went to the Today Show.
Yeah.
I'm not the biggest fan of Omarosa. However, she is trained in public speaking, and she knows how to handle herself in an interview. She owned Savannah Guthrie.
Did she? I didn't see that. I'm gonna have to go look for it now.
You probably need to look on YouTube, but that is one time, apart from the issues with the administration, point blank period, Savannah Guthrie was made to look like a novice in journalism.
Really?
And I really felt like she did not do her homework, because she allowed Omarosa to take control over the interview. But what was striking, they had that little weird segment right after the Today Show at 10 o'clock, which they booted Tamara Hall.
Yes, I used to watch that.
To bring old girl over from Fox to create a whole show that was a hot mess.
That didn't even last.
Did not last, because she made the cardinal sin with that whole issue of blackface and all of that. Very tone deaf as well. But when her and some other guests started her show, it was right after the segment with Omarosa and Savannah Guthrie. And they were like, oh my goodness, poor Savannah, that she had to deal with that. No. And I'm sitting there like, no, there is no poor Savannah. Savannah should have came ready, guns loaded, ready to go.
Had she not heard of Omarosa's reputation?
Right, like, did you not do your homework?
Omarosa ain't no joke.
Omarosa, when I say she took over the interview, she was asking all kinds of questions, and it was crazy. So what are your thoughts on this whole issue of control and victimizing? What y'all think about that? Tonya, what's your thoughts?
I wish I had seen that. I'm gonna have to try and see if I can pull that up, because I would love to see that. I'm not the biggest fan either of Omarosa, but I can imagine, I have no doubt in my mind that she is not a person that backs down easily from what I've seen of her, and she's highly capable of handling herself in whatever situation she finds herself in, which to me goes to a testament of the Black woman. But just the fact, I think that I can just imagine in that situation that happened, the interview process of everything is, here was this white woman who probably felt, that she was the main person who was doing the interview, and that this woman that was coming in would just kind of cater or bow down because she was the anchor person, but only to find out that no, this woman was one that would stand up readily to you and kind of call you on the carpet on some things and leave you to the point where you were probably with your mouth open. But I think that's what happens oftentimes when we do encounter strong African-American women who don't apologize for being able to own who they are and whatever venue that they find themselves in. And so I just wish I'd seen the interview.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look for it.
It's interesting to go back and look at the next point I want to segue to, because we've been looking at the victimizing of particularly white women, the Karens of the world, if you will. And what I've been seeing in just conversations with people, some of the biggest struggles have been rooted in this issue with white privilege. And one, white people not truly understanding what white privilege is. For them, they are deeply offended if you say, oh, that's white privilege, because they struggle with the term in and of itself, privilege, as if they have had the upper hand. Life is just easier. And a lot of times they've come back with the defense of, I've had to work for everything that I get. Nothing has been handed to me. What do you mean privilege? You know, I worked hard. Well, and I have to explain to some friends who are willing to listen, because everybody ain't open. And it ain't my job to make people become open. So I've learned, as the Bible says, don't cast your pearls before swine. You have to, from a spiritual sense, allow the Lord to lead you to who you can have these types of dialogues with, because there are some people who are white who truly do want to do better, who want to know, who have done things obliviously, not on purpose, and are trying to be better. And those are the ones that you can have these conversations with and dialogue and really wrestle with issues. But I say that to say, this whole issue of privilege, them not understanding and me having explained to them, no one is questioning whether or not you've worked hard, right? But you have to take into account the history that allows things not to be as hard or as difficult as people of color. You might be swimming in the same rough waters, but you're going along with the stream, whereas African Americans and people of color are going against the current. That is the difference. We're in the same water. You know, we may have come over on a different ship, but we all in the same boat now, but we're navigating the waters in a different manner. You exist, you have the access that you do because of things that were done years and years ago. When we talk about, I think Wilmington on Fire is having the second part of their conversation as well tonight. Black wealth and economic wealth in this country. So when we hear those conversations about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps, Black people were at one point in time forced, right, to create their own wealth. And we did. Rosewood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, countless other places. Wilmington, North Carolina, at one point in time was Chocolate City. It was the largest city in the state, and it was highly populated by African Americans, right? And not only was it populated by us, but we held economic jobs. We were doctors, we were lawyers, we were business owners, only to have jealousy and hatred come and burn it to the ground. So the wealth that we obtained was snatched away and taken from us. And we were wiped out of the history books in terms of our contributions. And we have places, you know, again, Wilmington, Hugh McRae Park.
Yeah.
And when we read about him, was a friend to African Americans, great, great people, only to find out he was one of the great leaders of the massacre in Wilmington. And so our children grow up not knowing their history. And in watching the documentary, you see how when people begin to find out about it and ask, they're turned away from learning about it because they're so afraid of people finding out the truth. So how do we wrestle, and how do we get those who are willing to listen to understand what privilege has been afforded to them by the looting and the massacre that have occurred to natives and African Americans and African descendants on this country. How do we reconcile? Because there is a reckoning that I believe is happening in this hour in our country that's coming, what is it? The bill is now due.
Yeah.
The bill is now due, and the roosters are coming home to roost.
Yes.
I have a
How do we
question
do that? Yeah.
in regards to what you're saying as far as with white privilege, because when you were talking about it, what came to my mind, and I don't know if y'all may have seen it, it was one of the red table talks that occurred with Jada. And she called in the daughter of the actress that was always on Hallmark. I can't remember her name. She and her husband had paid for their daughters to go to the school in California, the college.
Oh, yeah.
In California. I can't remember.
I know what you're talking. The big scandal, the big,
yes,
yeah.
the big
I can't
scandal.
remember the name, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
Right.
Oh, you're talking about Aunt Becky from Full House?
Yes.
I think her daughter's name Olivia, when they did the whole USC scandal.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Right. And they had the daughter, one of the daughters. Now they had paid for both daughters. One daughter didn't come to the table. Only
Olivia.
One of them came.
Olivia.
And so they were talking about this whole thing of white privilege. And one of the things that she said was that she didn't really realize that existed, because for her, it was just doing what everybody else did. And being that she was sheltered in that way of hanging around affluent people or rich people, then having to deal with the issues of social injustice and things like that never came to her doorstep. And so she was, just even in the things that she said, were y'all able to even listen to that red table talk that occurred?
I heard that one.
And I just wondered, as far as this whole notion of white privilege and even what she said, her response to it, what would be, your thoughts? Because for me, I was listening to her and everything. It disturbed me that this was something that both daughters were privy to. However, only one showed up to talk about this candidly at the red table. And then for her to say what she said, she's still in her house. They still have the money that they have, so the genuineness of it, I just didn't feel it. And so I think because of maybe what is being called on now, they come to the table and they'll say, yes, that was wrong, or yes, but the genuineness of it is what I don't feel. I don't.
And I think Jada's
really
mom
but just
called her out on that. Because I really liked how Jada's mom, she held nothing back and said, I'm sorry, but this is what it is, and really held her foot to the fire. And that's what they need. Because I do think, whereas the openness from my perspective really came from Jada and her mother, hosting to open this door to allow her to come on. I think from Olivia's perspective, you have to understand she at the time was, at the height of her getting into USC, was a social media influencer. And if mom was thinking properly, there wouldn't have been a push for them to go to college, because her daughter, Olivia, model looks, getting endorsements from her YouTube channel, thousands of followers. You know, was college necessary? For her, absolutely not. She would have been successful off of either branding, coming up with a makeup line. Her father is a fashion person. I mean, Massimo was all over Target. So she has the wheelhouse right there under her own roof. But you have a mother who was trying to live vicariously through her children, forcing something upon them that they never really truly even wanted, because she even said that in some of her videos. And that's what some of the backlash came from when she was a student at USC, saying, I'm just here because I want to go to the parties. You know, I want to do the fun stuff, but there was never any desire to be there for academics or whatever the case may be. She was doing it because that's what her mother wanted. But so with the fallout of that, because she was a rising social media star, I think her her buy-in was trying to revive and to kind of clean up her image a little bit so she could get back to the place where she was. Nah, sis, you're gonna have to sit in this for a minute.
Here's the thing that I think about this though. After the hype dies down, she gonna go right back to doing what she was doing before. Trust and believe. That was just like the girl who tackled the boy over the iPhone that she thought was hers. There's a pattern. There's a thing that they do. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize. I didn't have the intention. I'm going to seek some counseling, and I'm going to educate myself on all this is a standard thing that they say when they get caught saying what they really think. And so I think that there are some people whose privilege and financial insulation keeps them from knowing that they have privilege. Honey, if I'm living in the Tower of Scrabble or wherever I'm living, and everybody is rich like me, and I don't have to even see any Black people, because let's face it, in America, white people can go without seeing Black people, but Black people can't go without seeing white people. If I don't even have to interact with these people, and all I know of them is what I see on the news, on sitcoms, and on crime dramas, what am I going to think? So I'm going to believe that my privilege is just normal, because those people, and also the perpetuation of the stereotypes that started when people have such a level of cognitive dissonance that they have to tell themselves that the people who look like people are not people, so that they can continue to treat them like they're not people. And they continue to, in some form, whether it's watered down or not, tell those same stories. And then that same old skewed research that's out there from the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s that has been proven to be invalid, but it's on the internet, so it must be true. So people read those things. These new racists, I guess that's the best I can call them, because they're younger. They don't know all of the history, but their parents listen to Fox, they listen to Fox, they go to certain websites, and you know how the algorithm is. You go to a website, you're going to see more of the same. So you can get down in the rabbit hole. So they're not really, they're being insulated a lot of times, especially if they're rich, from even having to acknowledge and deal with this stuff. The regular old everyday people like us that have to work for a living and all that kind of stuff. This one girl told me this, and it blew my mind. She said, when I was a teenager, I got in trouble on my job because I took an application from a Black person and I didn't fold down the corner so they would know that they were Black. That was a standard practice. It still may be. You know how people will look at your name on an application and set your application to the side. We know these things happen. People say they don't happen, but we know that they do, because why in the world, when I finally got my degree and I wanted to work at the Department of Social Services, applied for years and years and years, and I did not get the job until I got my degree. the girl that was sitting across from me, I said, what is your degree in? White girl, I don't have a degree. But yet I had to have a degree before I could get that job. And so these are the types of systems that they have in place. They have little code words and things that they say and do that perpetuates keeping them isolated in their tower of privilege. And there's a lot of things that we don't even know about because we've always been kept on the outside. And so I think that privilege is not going to go away until the people who have it tear it down. Until they, and let's face it, listen, if I was rich and I didn't have to deal with y'all peasants, I'm just playing. But you know what I'm saying? It creates a different world for you, you know, and I think that's why the scripture says the love of money is the root of all evil, not money itself, but the love of money. People who don't want to lose, like you were talking about Olivia, she wants to be able to come back and get endorsements again and all that kind of stuff. So she went to the red table talk and she talked to them because I need people to see that I'm not really like that. I just didn't know. And this is what has been used because they weaponize our melanin and their tears.
Mm. So true.
One of the things that I recently encountered, my daughter, she graduated from college and she's an officer in the Army, and her field is she wanted to go into the artillery field. Mm. And so she's there. She's actually stationed in Hawaii now, doing quite well. Well, she called us one evening and she was crying, and I was, kind of worried. I was like, what's wrong, Raina? She said, I did everything I knew to do. I don't know why, what happened. I'm like, wait, calm down. What's going on? And they brought in a Citadel person, Caucasian male, brought him into her department. She trained him. Mm-hmm. Then there was a promotion, I guess, that was on the table. And with Raina doing what she thought, she was doing and everything, she thought that, she would be in position. Well, they ended up giving this to the very guy, Caucasian guy, that she trained. Mm-hmm. She trained. Mm-hmm. And, just seeing her tears and everything like that, and having to tell her, babe, I know it hurts. I know, you worked hard. I know, I don't want you to allow this to make you feel like you're just not good enough. Trying to still encourage her to let her know, one, you're in the Army. Two, you're in a male-dominated portion of the Army, which deals with artillery. Mm-hmm. Three, you are, a woman. Four, you Black on top of all of that. On top of all of that, you Black. And these are the things that will happen. And just, as a Black woman, it was hard having to, you've had the general conversations with your kids, all the time growing up and everything. But now this is where the rubber hits the road. Now, this is where she is pretty much the person that's in charge of her life. I mean, this is her profession. This is what she's striving to do, and she's working hard and everything like that. But even with everything that she does, just understanding the obstacles that she has to face. And I think that was really the first time it really hit her, because we've been talking to her all the time before. But even with kids, you know, sometimes hearing it from their parents, it's not really like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they mix and intermingle with all races of kids at this age anyway. I mean, they all hang together and all this kind of stuff, but still trying to help her to understand it's okay. That's your friend. That's a good thing. But you still have to remember, you still have to know, you know, that your color, though it may not be spoken, is spoken.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, and so just, I mean, for me, was I, you know, devastated or did it hurt? Yes, but I wasn't surprised. But for her, she was devastated and she was hurt and she was crying and she just started, you know, but I don't even trying to help our children to see that sometimes even with talking to them, they feel that it's not really that serious, or, you know, it ain't that bad, mama, you trying to say this, but experience is a very good lesson.
Yeah.
Is, I mean, a very good teacher, you know.
Yeah.
And so now it's no longer, you know, oh, mom, it's not that serious. It's like, boom, it's now slapped you in your face.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to deal with that now. And you know, learning how to smile even in the midst of your pain.
Yeah.
And how still to get up and go to work.
Mm-hmm.
Because the bottom line is, you know, you working for Uncle Sam now, and this your job.
Yeah.
And whether, you know, the unfairness of everything, you still got to go to work or they're going to court martial you.
Yeah.
You still got to show up and do, you know, what you need to do.
Yeah.
You know, for you. And so it's, I don't know, it's just,
But I think part of that too is each generation is becoming more and more tolerant. Not in a bad way, but we're moving away a lot of that traditional way of thinking in terms of race. But I think we see that with our children. That has always been the case. You put children on the playground, they're going to play together because they don't recognize, because my friend is the chocolate crayon color, that they're less than or better than or whatever. That's just my friend. But we start going through some heartbreaking experiences as we grow, because we know that racism and these types of things are taught. It is not an innate ability. These ideologies that are passed down from generation to generation still clings. So it's one of those things, you know, situation with her, as we all have, you don't know until you know. Yeah. When you are in those situations, we've heard about it. And when it happens, it's gut-wrenching. It is heartbreaking. I have plenty of stories. You know, growing up, my dad used to nickname me Tootie from The Facts of Life, because she was the main African-American character on the show. And amongst all these white girls and white women, majority of my friends growing up were white. Because I was stuck in that category where, you know, you were picked on among your African-American community if you talked proper, so to speak. If your subjects and your verb agree, that was categorized as talking white. If you excelled academically, then you were trying to be white. And because, you know, I was one that, you know, really loved academics, did well and excelled, I wasn't Black enough to be with my Black friends. And then you're in this space where even though you have white friends, you're only you're friends with them to a certain point. And there are going to be some spaces in which you're not going to be invited. You're not going to be able to be a part of. So you find yourself in this place of trying to ask, where do I fit in? Because I ain't Black enough for them. And clearly I'm not white, so I can't be one of them. So where do I fit? And working in school systems, one thing that I saw that was very phenomenal and seeing done in different areas, when I worked with my brother at a private school, one thing that helped the students of color there, he started an affinity group called Young Men of Color. Because a lot of times when you are immersed, as you were saying, Deidre, in spaces where, African Americans, we're always going to see people that don't look like us. We walk into a room and immediately we counting, am I the only one?
Yep.
We doing a mental count.
Yep.
Like, okay, let me see.
Mhm.
But we started to see when you took students out of urban places, particularly like Charlotte or whatever, and even on more urban than Charlotte, public school system where they were really not being challenged and put them in a place that were academically challenging, but take them out of their comfort zone of cultural similarities, they begin to go down. Not that they can't handle the work, not that they can't handle what's being thrown at them academically, but when you don't see people who look like you and all you see is a sea of white, it does something to you that ultimately you begin to shut down, and that eventually will have an effect on the academics. But starting that affinity group to work with young men of color, to talk about issues of diversity and what they're feeling, really help them thrive in a place and in a space safely where they could talk about different things that affected their culture, and even inviting white allies, as we call them, in. They had young women of color, things like that. And we see these affinity groups in various organizations as well. So I think that has been helpful to a point, but we're living in a time now, generations are becoming more tolerant, which is great. But on the other hand, I think the detriment of that, we are raising children that unless it's being taught in a home, they really don't know Black history.
Yeah.
They don't know where they come from. Not saying that you got to beat them down and bog them down with slavery, because that is not the beginning of our history. We are kings, we are queens, we are descendants of greatness. The math that we're studying in schools, that was us. The architecture, that was us. The art, that was us. The fashion, everything that became great, ultimately rests, rules, and lies with our people.
And actually
So
still does. If you think
yes,
about it, cultural appropriation, hair, clothes,
right. So the very
everything.
basis, the foundation, we laid it worldwide, period. And so when we enlighten our people, our children to that, and of course we got to go through the ugliness and stuff of of slavery and civil rights movement, but I think that's where we get stuck, because if that's all they hear is this, but that we need to take them to the beginning, because slavery is not the beginning of our history. It was said that they took slaves from Africa. No,
No.
they took chiefs, they took kings, they took queens, they took architects, they took mathematicians and made them slaves. That's what we have to teach our children, and just learn how to navigate this space. And I'm grateful for people like Shonda Rhimes in the entertainment industry, and how she narrates, and her writing is so great, and putting us in predominantly white spaces, but allowing us to be Black in a way that is self reassuring, and also Marvel. I don't know
Yeah,
if y'all are Marvel fans,
I am.
but
I definitely
this
am.
Disney Plus, this series of the Winter Soldier and Falcon has been so validating, and just makes you feel so great to be African American at a time like this. There's no better time, I think, as crazy as it seems, in the midst of the Andrew Brown Juniors, in the midst of the George Floyds, in the midst of um, our women that are being gunned down. There's no better time to be Black. Our time is now. We're rising in spite of. So,
Well,
um,
I think that that is since we're almost at time, that was a perfect way to end. I don't think I need to say anything else, P. I think you wrapped it up very beautifully. Once again, ladies, you know, we are opinionated and we giving our opinion. We talking trash, talking real, and seeking to heal. Thank you so much, class of 2012 and class of 2019, right?
Yeah.
We hoodlums. We talking trash, y'all. All right. Catch us in 2 weeks. We'll be back and we'll have a guest. Bye. Don't y'all go nowhere.